In this video, we're going to talk about lines and angles. The first type of line that you need to be familiar with are parallel lines. Parallel lines do not intersect. So let's call the first line A and the second line B. So we could say that A is parallel to line B. So these two lines are also parallel. They share the same slope. So if the first line has a slope of 3/4, the second line has the same exact slope. Perpendicular lines are different. Whenever you have two perpendicular lines intersecting each other, they will form a right angle. So they meet at 90 degrees. Let's call this line A and line B. So the way you can describe it, you could say line A is perpendicular to line B. So this symbol represents that those two lines are perpendicular. So let's say that line C has a slope of 3/4. What do you think the slope will be for line D? To find the slope of the perpendicular line, you need to flip the fraction. So instead of 3/4, it's going to be 4/3. Now you need to change the sign from positive to negative. So it has a slope negative 4/3. When you have a third line that intersects two parallel lines, that third line is the transversal. So let's say this is line A and B. So if A is parallel to B, then C is going to be the transversal. We'll call this angle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Angles 3, 4, 5, and 6 are known as interior angles. When you think of the word interior, what do you think of? Interior means on the inside. So those four angles, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're in between or on the inside of the two parallel lines. Angles 1, 2, 7, and 8 are known as exterior angles because they're outside of the two parallel lines. Now, which angles are alternate interior angles? You need to be able to identify those. So the fact that they're on the interior has to be between 3, 4, and 5, 6. 3 and 6 are alternate interior angles. They're on the inside of the two parallel lines, but they're opposite of the transversal. 3 is on the left side of the transversal, and 6 is on the right side of the transversal. So that's why they're called alternate interior angles. Now, alternate interior angles are congruent. So angle 3 is equal to angle 6. They have the same exact measure, assuming if A and B are parallel. Angle 4 and 5 are also alternate interior angles. They're congruent. Now, what about alternate exterior angles? Angle 1 and 8 are alternate exterior angles. It turns out also angle 2 and 7 are alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. They're the same. And if you're wondering why they're called alternate exterior angles, well, first the word exterior, they're on the outside or on the exterior of the two parallel lines, and they alternate with reference to the transversal. So angle 1 is on the left side of the transversal or line C, angle 8 is on the right side. So they're on alternate sides. And 2 and 7 are alternate exterior angles. Now the next term that you need to be familiar with are corresponding angles. Angle 2 and angle 6 are corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are congruent. angles 1 and 5 are corresponding angles. Angles 4 and 8 are corresponding, and 3 and 7 correspond to each other. So angle 4 is congruent to angle 8, and angle 3 is congruent to angle 7. So those are corresponding angles. They're on the same position on the parallel lines in relation to the transversal. So if you look at 2 and 6, they're both on the right side of the transversal, and they're both above the two parallel lines. If you look at 3 and 7, they're both on the left side of the transversal, and they're both below the parallel lines. So they're in the same position on the parallel lines. In this case, they're both below it, and they're both on the left side of the transversal. Now, there's some other terms that you need to be familiar with as well. The next term is consecutive interior angles. So 4 and 6 are consecutive interior angles. They're on the inside of the transversal. And consecutive means basically the next one after. So for example, consecutive integers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 is consecutive to 2 because it comes right after. So if you look at this angle, the next one is 6. So those are consecutive interior angles. Consecutive interior angles, they add up to 180. So basically they're supplementary. So angle 4 plus angle 6 adds up to 180. Angle 3 and angle 5 adds up to 180. So they're supplementary. Now the last term you need to be familiar with are vertical angles. So whenever you have two lines that intersect each other, they will form vertical angles. Let's say this angle is 50, this angle is also 50. Vertical angles are congruent. 1 and 4 are vertical angles, so 1 and 4 are congruent. 2 and 3 are vertical angles. 7 and 6 are vertical angles, so they equal each other. And 5 and 8 are congruent to each other. So those are vertical angles. So anytime you have a transversal or a third line that intersects two parallel lines, you're going to have a lot of congruent angles. So just make sure you're familiar with those terms. Now the next term that you need to be familiar with are complementary angles. So let's say that line A and line B are perpendicular to each other. So let me just go ahead and extend those two lines. So that means that this angle between A and B is 90 degrees. But let's draw a line. Let's say this angle is 30. And let's call this line C. And let's call this vertex V. So angle CVB is 30 degrees. What is angle AVC? So you know they have to add up to 90 because angle AVB is 90. So 90 minus 30 is 60. So therefore, these two angles are complementary. They add up to 90. So angle AVC plus angle CVB has to add up to angle AVB. So that's an example of complementary angles. They add up to 90. The next one that you need to be familiar with are supplementary angles, which we briefly talked about before. Supplementary angles add up to 180. So let's say if you have a straight line and there's another line that passes through it. The total angle of a straight line will always be 180. A full circle is 360, so half a circle, that's 180. So if this angle is 60 the other angle has to be 120. So let's call this A, B, C, and D. So angle ABD, that's basically 120, plus DBC, which is 60, is equal to basically the straight line ABC, which is 180. So whenever you have a straight line, all the angles that are part of that straight line has to add up to 180. So here's an example. Let's say this is 40 and this is 70. What is the missing angle? And this is a straight line. So 70 plus 40 plus x has to add up to 180. 70 plus 40 is 110. So to find the value of x, we need to subtract 110 from both sides. So x is 180 minus 110, so x is also 70 degrees. So now you're familiar with the terms supplementary and complementary. So keep in mind, if two angles are complementary, that means that they add up to 90 degrees. If two angles are supplementary, they add up to 180 degrees. So now let's go over a few practice problems in solving certain things. So I'm going to give you a few questions, and I want you to find the value of x. So in the first example, what is the value of x? Now these two angles are congruent. They're vertical angles. So therefore x is simply 70. In the second example, these two form a linear pair. They're supplementary because they form a straight line when you add it together. So therefore 80 plus x is equal to 180. So x is going to be 180 minus 80, so x is 100 degrees. So some of these problems are not going to be very difficult. So let's say if this is 30 and this is 2x plus 5 and this is y. Find the value of x and y. Actually, let's say this is y plus 8. Feel free to pause the video and work on that problem. So we know that 30 and y plus 8 are vertical angles, so therefore they're congruent. So we could set 30 equal to y plus 8. Therefore y is going to be 30 minus 8, so y is 22. Now what is the value of x? Now these two, they form a linear pair, so they're supplementary. So 30 plus 2x plus 5 has to add up to 180. So now we could find the value of x. 30 plus 5, that's 35. So if we subtract both sides by 35, 2x is 180 minus 35, which is 145. And then we need to divide by 2. So half of 140 is 70, half of 5 is 2.5. So half of 145 is going to be 72.5. So that's the value of x. Let's say this angle is 35. What is the value of x? Let's call this A, B, C, and D. So, and let's say that angle ABC is a right angle. What is the value of angle DBC? Or basically, what is the value of x? So because this is a right angle, it represents 90 degrees. Therefore, angle ABD, which is 35, must add up to, well, angle ABD plus angle DBC, which is x. They have to add up to angle ABC, which is 90. So basically, these two angles are complementary. So x is simply 90 minus 35, which is 55. Here's another example. It's a very similar problem, but slightly different. So let's say this is 7x, and this is 11x. And let's say angle ABC is once again a right angle. What is the value of angle ABD? So feel free to pause the video and try this problem. Angle ABD, which is represented by 7x, plus angle DBC, which is represented by 11x, they have to add up to 90. So we can say that 7x plus 11x is 90. So now let's find the value of x. So 7 plus 11 is 18. And 90 divided by 18 is 5. So x is equal to 5. But our goal is to find a measure of angle ABD, not simply the value of x. Angle ABD, keep in mind, it's 7x. So our goal is to find the value of 7x. So that's 7 times 5, which turns out to be 35 degrees. If we wanted to find the angle of angle DBC, that's 11x. 11 times 5 is 55. Now let's say if we have a straight line. And let's say this is A, B, C, and D. And let's say that angle DBC is 7x minus 6, and angle ABD is 13x plus 26. Go ahead and find the angle DBC. Find its measure. Feel free to pause the video. So we said ABC is a straight line. That means that it has an angle of 180. So angle ABD plus angle DBC has to add up to angle ABC. ABD and DBC, they're basically adjacent angles. So this is ABD, and its angle is 13x plus 26. Angle DBC is 7x minus 6. So those two have to add up to ABC, which is basically a straight line, and the angle of a straight line is always 180. So therefore, these two angles are supplementary since they add up to 180. So now our goal is to find the value of x. 13x plus 7x adds up to 20x. And then 26 minus 6, that's 20. So 20x plus 20 is equal to 180. So now let's subtract both sides by 20. 180 minus 20, that's 160. And now let's divide both sides by 20. We can cancel a 0, so this becomes 16 divided by 2, which is 8. So that's the value of x. Now that we have the value of x, we could find angle DBC, which is 7x minus 6. So we got to take this answer, plug it in into 7x minus 6. So it's going to be 7 times 8 minus 6. 7 times 8, that's basically 56. And 56 minus 6 is 50. So therefore, angle DBC is 50 degrees, which means that ABD has to be 180 minus 50, or 130, since these two are supplementary. Let's call this line C and line D. And let's say that C is parallel to D. and we have a transversal, which we'll call line A. Now, if this angle, let's say, is 50, find all the other angles formed by this transversal. So go ahead and find angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Angle 2 is a vertical angle with respect to that angle, so therefore they're congruent. So this is 50. Angle 1 is supplementary to angle 50, so they have to add up to 180. So 180 minus 50 is 130. Angle 3 is a vertical angle with respect to 130, so angle 3 is also 130. Now what about angle 4? Notice that angle 1 and angle 4 are corresponding angles, so they're congruent. Angle 5 is an alternate interior angle with respect to angle 2. Alternate interior angles are congruent, so angle 5 is also 50 degrees. I think we call this angle 6, which is a vertical angle with respect to angle 5, so that's 50. And angle 7 is a vertical angle with respect to 130, so that's also 130. And so that's basically how you can solve that. Here's another example. So let's say that these two lines are parallel. We'll call it line A and line B. And C is the transversal. So if this is 70, go ahead and find all the other angles. So this must be 70 as well. And these two angles are supplementary. 180 minus 70 is 110. So this is a vertical angle, so these are congruent. This angle corresponds to this angle, so that's 110, which means this is 110, and this is 70, and that is 70. So you can quickly find all the angles for a problem like this. Now here's another problem. Let's say line A and line B are parallel to each other. And there's going to be two transversals. So this is one transversal. We can call it line C. And it intersects with another transversal, which we'll call line D. And let's say that this angle is 50 degrees. And let's say this angle is 40. Go ahead and find all other angles that can be formed by this figure. So this angle is 40. We know this has to be 40. They're vertical angles. And therefore, 180 minus 40 is 140. Now, this is 50. This must be 50 as well. They're vertical angles. And these two are supplementary. 180 minus 50 is 130, which means this is 130. Now, these two angles are consecutive interior angles. They add up to 180, which means this is 130. Now, these two angles are alternate interior angles. So therefore, this is 50. And this angle and that angle, they're alternate exterior angles, so they're congruent, which means this must be 130. And so this angle on the inside is 50. Now, let's call this x. What is the value of angle x? What would you say? Now keep in mind, this figure is not drawn to scale. I just made this problem and put some numbers to it. So if that is x, you need to know that the three angles of a triangle must always add up to 180. So if that's 40 and this is 50, and this is x, 40 plus 50 plus x has to be 180. So if you take 180 and subtract it by 40 and then by 50, you should get, let's see, 180 minus 40 is 140. 140 minus 50 is 90. Therefore, x is 90. Which means this has to be 92, even though it's not drawn to scale. So these are complementary. So basically, all of these angles will be 90. They're right angles, but they're not drawn to scale. Let's try another similar problem, but one that hopefully is not 90. So this time, we're going to make this angle 60, and this angle is going to be 110. So go ahead and find all other angles. If that's 110, these two angles are supplementary, which means this angle must be 70, and this has to be 70 as well, which means this is 110. So now let's find the missing angle, angle x. So 60 plus 70 plus x has to add up to 180. 60 and 70 is 130. And 180 minus 130 is 50. So therefore this angle is 50. Now that we have all three angles of that triangle, we could find everything else. Now those two are supplementary, which means this must be 120. 120 plus 60 adds up to 180. So that's 60, that's 120. Now, these two are corresponding angles, so therefore this is 60. These two are alternate exterior angles, so they're congruent. This is 120. And these two are alternate interior angles, so that's 60. And this is going to be 120, since these two are vertical angles. Now, these two are vertical angles as well. So this is 50. And then 180 minus 50 is 130. So this is 130 as well. Now these two are alternate interior angles, so this must be 50. And those two are alternate interior angles, so that's 130. And then these two are corresponding angles. So corresponding angles are congruent. And these two are alternate exterior angles, which are also congruent. Now notice that we have a quadrilateral in the middle. A quadrilateral is a four-sided figure. A three-sided figure, like a triangle, has an interior angle. All the interior angles of a triangle adds up to 180. So any three-sided figure will always have the sum of their angles, which is 180. If you have a four-sided figure like this quadrilateral highlighted in red, the sum of those four angles will be 360. So if you add 60 and 50, that's 110, plus 120, that's 230, plus 130. 230 plus 130, that's going to be 360. So there's a rule where you could find the sum of the interior angles. It's n minus 2 times 180. So for a three-sided figure like a triangle, n is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. 180 times 1 is 180. Now, if you have a four-sided figure like a quadrilateral, n is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 times 180, that's 360. So the sum of all the interior angles is 360. Now, let's say if you have a five-sided figure, in this case a pentagon, using the formula n minus 2 times 180, this time n is going to be 5 since there are 5 sides. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 times 180 is 540. So the sum of all 5 angles, let's say angle A, B, C, D, and E, the sum of all 5 of these angles has to add up to 540. Now let's work on some word problems. Feel free to pause the video and try these problems yourself. Number 1, if angle A and angle B are complementary, what is the value of angle B if angle A is 32? Now, if you recall, whenever you hear the word complementary, that means that the two angles add up to 90. So angle A plus angle B equals 90. Now we're given the value of angle A is 32. So 32 plus angle B is 90. So to find angle B, we need to subtract both sides by 32. So angle B is going to be 90 minus 32. 90 minus 30 is 60, and then 60 minus 2 is 58. So that's going to be the value of angle B. Number 2, if angle A and angle B are supplementary, what is the value of angle A if angle B is 74 degrees? So keep in mind the word supplementary means that the two angles add up to 180 degrees. So angle A plus angle B is equal to 180 degrees. Now this time we have the value of angle B, which is 74 degrees. So let's go ahead and find the value of angle A. So let's begin by subtracting both sides by 74. So angle A is going to be 180 minus 74. 180 minus 70 is 110, and 110 minus 4 is 106. So this is going to be the answer. Number 3, angles R and S are complementary. If angle R is 3x plus 1 and angle S is 9x minus 7, what is the measure of angle S? So go ahead and take a minute and work on this problem. So these two angles are complementary, so we know that R plus S has to add up to 90. Angle R is 3x plus 1, and angle S is 9x minus 7. So now all we need to do is find the value of x, and then we could find the measure of angle S. 3x plus 9x, that's 12x. 1 plus negative 7 is negative 6, so 12x minus 6 is 90. Now let's go ahead and add 6 to both sides. So 12x is equal to 96. And now let's divide both sides by 12. 96 divided by 12 is 8. So x is equal to 8. Now that we have the value of x, we could find the measure of angle S. Angle S is 9x minus 7. So all we got to do is take this value, plug it into that expression. So it's 9 times 8 minus 7. 9 times 8 is 72. And 72 minus 7 is 65. So that's the measure of angle S. It's 65 degrees. Number 4, angles X and Y are supplementary. If angle X is 11x minus 22 and angle Y is 5x plus 10, what is the value of angle Y? So the angles are supplementary, which means that they add up to 180. So x plus y equals 180. Now angle X is 11x minus 22. Let's not confuse these two letters with each other. Angle Y is 5x plus 10. So now let's go ahead and find the value of x. 11x plus 5x adds up to 16x. Negative 22 plus 10 adds up to negative 12. So now let's solve. Let's add 12 to both sides. So 16x is equal to 192. Now let's divide both sides by 16. 192 divided by 16, that's about 12. So now we could find the measure of angle y. Angle y is 5x plus 10. So let's insert this value into that expression. So it's going to be 5 times 12 plus 10. 5 times 12 is 60. 60 plus 10 is 70. So angle y is 70 degrees, which means that angle x must be 110 degrees. So let's say that these two lines, line A and B, are parallel to each other, and we have a transversal, line C. And once again, we're going to say that this is angle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in this example, let's say that angle 2 is equal to 5x, and angle 3 is equal to 3x plus 24. Your goal is to find the value of x. So feel free to pause the video and go ahead and try that problem. So what is the relationship between angles 2 and 3? Angles 2 and 3 are vertical angles, and as we know, vertical angles are congruent. So we could say that angle 2 is equal to angle 3. Now angle 2 is 5x, angle 3 is 3x plus 24. So now all we need to do is find the value of x. So let's begin by subtracting both sides by 3x. 5x minus 3x is 2x. So 2x is equal to 24. And 24 divided by 2 is 12. So that's the answer to the first problem. X is equal to 12. Now let's move on to our second example. So let's say that angle 4 is equal to 5x plus 5. And angle 6 is equal to 10x minus 50. Your task is to find the measure of angle 6. So go ahead and take a minute and do that. The first thing we need to do is identify the relationship between angles 4 and 6. Angles 4 and 6 are consecutive interior angles. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary. They add up to 140. I mean, not 140, but 180. So angle 4 plus angle 6 equals 180. Angle 4 is 5x plus 5. Angle 6 is 10x minus 50. So now all we need to do is find the value of x, and then we can use that to find the measure of angle 6. 5x plus 10x is 15x. 5 plus negative 50 is negative 45. So let's add 45 to both sides. 180 plus 40 is 220. And then if you add 5 to it, this is going to be 225. 225 divided by 15 is 15. So x is equal to 15. So now we could find the measure of angle 6. Angle 6 is 10x minus 50. So let's replace x with 15. So we're going to have 10 times 15 minus 50. 15 times 10 is 150. And 150 minus 50 is 100. So 100 is the measure of angle 6. Let's try one more problem. Let's say that angle 1 is equal to 9x plus 16. And angle 2, I mean not 2, but angle 8 is 12x minus 2. Using this information, go ahead and find the measure of angle 1. So what is the relationship between angles 1 and 8? 1 and 8 are alternate exterior angles, and they're congruent. So because they're congruent, angles 1 and 8 are equal to each other, which means that 9x plus 16 is equal to 12x minus 2. So let's go ahead and find the value of x. Let's begin by subtracting both sides by 9x, and at the same time, let's add 2 to both sides. 16 plus 2 is 18. 12x minus 9x is 3x. 18 divided by 3 is 6. So x is equal to 6. Now that we have the value of x, we could find a measure of angle 1. Angle 1 is 9x plus 16. So now let's replace x with 6. So angle 1 is going to be 9 times 6 plus 16. 9 times 6 is 54. 54 plus 16 is 70. So the measure of angle 1 is 70 degrees. So that is it for this video. So hopefully it gave you a good understanding of parallel lines, perpendicular lines, transversals, and now you know how to identify corresponding angles, alternate interior and exterior angles, consecutive interior angles, and basically everything else that we went over in this video. So that's it, and have a nice day.